Welcome to Public Speaking with Peter George. Do you want to be calm, confident, and credible every time you speak in public? Then stay tuned as Peter and his guests discuss public speaking tips, techniques, and tactics that help you increase your impact, influence, and income. Here's your host, Peter George.
Before we get to this episode, I'm thrilled to let you know that my new book is now available. In The Captivating Public Speaker, Engage, Impact, and Influence Your Audience Every Time, you'll find the AMPed framework, the same one I use while coaching my clients. This framework takes you step by step through creating and delivering presentations that resonate with your audiences because they're based on your audiences. And I got to tell you, I'm truly honored by the enthusiastic reviews the book's received from speakers and authors, including one from Emmy Award-winning keynote speaker Clint Pulver that begins, "The Captivating Public Speaker is a love letter to creating significant impact and authentic influence." I'd be just as honored if you'd check it out at petergeorgepublicspeaking.com/book. petergeorgepublicspeaking.com/book. Now, on to this week's episode. Have you ever looked into other activities that may help you become a more effective, more engaging speaker? You have? Then you probably found things like improv, stand-up comedy, and impromptu speaking sessions. But what about ballroom dancing? To be truthful, I've never heard about this either. But when you listen to my guest, Mark Herschberg, you'll understand how this and other activities may help you in your journey. Mark is the author of the Career Toolkit, Essential Skills for Success That No One Taught You. From tracking criminals and terrorists on the dark web to creating marketplaces and new authentication systems, Mark has spent his career launching and developing new ventures at startups, Fortune 500s, and in academia. He has also helped start the Undergraduate Practice Opportunities Program, dubbed MIT's Career Success Accelerator, where he teaches annually. Here's my conversation with Mark Herschberg. Hi, Mark. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
Mark, you said you used to be a horrible speaker. In what way was that?
I was the kid who hated any type of public speaking in school. When you'd have to stand up and do your book report or 3-minute presentation, I would just look down at the paper. I couldn't make eye contact with the audience. I didn't want to look at anyone. I was nervous. I would just kind of forget and not know where I wanted to go. I wouldn't enunciate. I was really quiet. And so I had all the classic problems beginning speakers have.
So you were like a lot of kids in school.
Yes. I wanted to just hide in the corner. Whenever we did school plays, I was always cast as the student producer, which was their way of keeping me off the stage.
You must have been very thankful for that.
I was.
What type of speaking do you do today?
I do a whole bunch. I'm an executive. And so as an executive, you're regularly talking to your teams, to departments, to the whole company. Often I'm involved in sales calls or partnerships, and I'll have to present to people outside the company, to our partners or potential customers, obviously board presentations. And now these are perhaps a little more on the casual side, although I do consider them public speaking. By the way, I consider interviewing public speaking as well. We can talk about that if you'd like. But then I do teaching at MIT. I've been teaching there for over 20 years. So there's a lot of public speaking there. It's very interactive. We try not to just talk at the students for hours on end, but it's still public speaking. In fact, I even sometimes teach public speaking at MIT. Then I will also go to conferences, sometimes as a technical content person. I'm a CTO, a Chief Technology Officer. And so I'll be there to talk on a panel or do a talk about something. But I'm also a keynote speaker and workshop person. So I'm a professional speaker as well and do that type. So a whole range of speaking.
You bring up a good point that public speaking isn't just getting up on stage. It can be in an interview. It can be speaking to students. And God knows when students go into class, especially that first day in class, they're hoping you're a decent public speaker.
They are.
They want that interaction you mentioned. They want it to be informative, but also entertaining a little bit. I remember the last thing I ever wanted was someone standing up there and just droning on class after class after class.
One of the classes first semester freshman year that I quickly dropped was this professor who would have every other word be emphasized, an emphasized discourse marker. And it drove me nuts. It was like someone just ringing a buzzer every few seconds. I couldn't stand him. I'm sure he was brilliant, but I could not listen to him.
Not to go too far down this track, but why do you think it is that a lot of people, say professors, teachers, people who get a position in their career that requires public speaking, but they don't strive to become more effective public speakers?
Because they're not evaluated on the public speaking. The joke at MIT, there was an award called the Baker Award that goes to the junior faculty, someone who's not tenured, who is the best teacher. It's a way to reward, you're a great teacher. And the joke is whoever wins that award, it's a kiss of death for tenure because they never get tenure. Well, why is that? When you look at a research university and top universities like MIT, like the Ivies, they're looking at your publish or perish. Are you doing good research? Are you putting it out? As long as you're not murdering students, we really don't care if you're a good teacher or not. So they have no incentive to really get better. To his credit, Professor Patrick Winston, who is a fantastic professor, he was a brilliant researcher, a great lecturer. He started at MIT a program called MIT Speaks, where he said, look, we all need to get better. Professors, grad students, undergrads, and really try to emphasize that capability at MIT. But if you don't have a senior person like that who's promoting it, there's really no incentive for anyone to invest in their public speaking once they are within the university. To be fair, a lot of these professors don't realize when they do talks outside of the university, when they apply for research grants, public speaking will help them, but they don't really think of it. Their primary focus is just publishing papers.
Well, that answers that question. I've had that in the back of my mind for years. If I started seeing, like you said, you dropped out of that class. If I started seeing a number of students drop out of my class, I'd wonder why. At least I think I would, and try to resolve it. But I understand what you're saying about why they don't necessarily do that.
And there again, at top research universities, teaching classes, that's the annoyance. That's the, by the way, you have to teach one class per year. They want to be left alone and do their research, many of them. So they don't mind if fewer students show up. That's different at teaching universities and teaching colleges where it is about the teaching.
These others can just put in their time. I had 3 kids. I'm all set.
Exactly.
All right. Well, back to your journey. What did you do to improve your speaking?
I realized I needed to get better. And I did a little bit of basic training, the things our teachers would tell us. What began to help me was joining the debate club in high school. Because debate, obviously, you stand up, you think about cohesive arguments, and that certainly helped. I also, as I got older into my 20s, I learned to do things like looking at other speakers and saying, wow, she's really good. Okay, why? What is it she's doing or not doing that can help me? And so I was very specific. Instead of just, well, I want to be a better speaker, I was concrete, I was specific, whether incorporating certain techniques or just working. So one of the techniques I used to have a lot of disfluencies. I used to say and a lot, as many of us do. And I remember the way I trained myself for that is in that model of unconsciously unknowing to consciously unknowing to, and you start building up. I might have gotten the order wrong there. Once I realized all the disfluencies, I said, okay, every time I say that, I would hold my hands together and I would pinch myself. And every time I recognized a disfluency, I'd give myself that negative feedback, and over time built up the negative reinforcement to remove it from my speech. And using little techniques like that, positive and negative reinforcement, I would change the smaller behaviors.
Very smart. It's great that you took it upon yourself to do that. So debate club, anything else?
The other thing I did that really gave me an incredible boost was ballroom dancing. At MIT and in my 20s, I was a competitive ballroom dancer. And this was the best thing I did for my speaking.
All right, you got to explain that.
Now, of course, in ballroom dancing, we are not talking. You're a little busy dancing. There's a lot of loud music. But here's what's happening. When we speak, the biggest thing that holds back early speakers, it's nervousness. It's the inner critic. It's thinking, is my shirt untucked? Am I going to forget the words? Am I going to trip over something? Oh, is that person judging me? And you have that running through your head and you're nervous and you're scared. And that's what's holding you back. When you are a competitive ballroom dancer, you are out on the floor, dancing around, literally being judged. Like people are watching you and saying, nope, not good enough, or yes, you are. They don't actually tell you in person. They're doing little check marks on their scorecards, but you're being judged for what you do. And you know when you're dancing, you do those moves and go, oh my God, I just screwed that up. And oh, she was looking at me. All right, we're not getting a mark from that judge. You sometimes screw up really badly. You sometimes have those great rounds where you say, yeah, I nailed it. Or sometimes you think you nailed it, but you still didn't get the recall for the next round. But the key thing is when you screw up, when you get judged, when you don't make the recall, say, you know what? It's okay. I'm doing this for fun. Sure, I'd like to do better, but that's okay. It's not the end of the world. In fact, one of the things I love in ballroom, every once in a while, very rarely, you will see a couple fall. Somehow couples bump into each other. It's a crowded floor. Once in a blue moon, a couple falls. When they get back up, the entire audience applauds. And they basically are saying, yeah, we've all been there. We're behind you. Keep going. And I love that about the culture of ballroom dancing. And when you go through this, whether you trip and fall or whether you screw up and you realize it's not the end of the world, that's the confidence on stage. And if you think about it, we've all been the audience when the person on stage accidentally trips over a chord or suddenly the power goes out or they have some type of problem. And we think, okay, hey, the person's not an idiot. It's okay. We've been there. But when we're on stage, we think, oh my God, everyone thinks I'm the idiot. And so once you get past that, you get more relaxed and you become a better speaker. So for me, it was competitive ballroom dancing. For others, it could be doing improv or acting or a sport or something else where you are out there being watched, screwing up and getting through it.
And that's the thing. We always get through it. And don't you think most people, and you're alluding to this, most people really are pulling for us all the time we're up speaking?
They are. No one wants to see you crash and burn because they're there. They think you have something valuable to say they'd like to get. And they've all been there. At some point, we've all done that presentation and we can sympathize. And you have to remember, in fact, I had a great moment a couple years ago when I was teaching a class at MIT. And all of a sudden, our AV system just went down. 10 minutes into it, this wasn't my presentation. I was covering for someone else. His flight got delayed due to a storm. So the night before, he gave me his slides. I looked them over. I knew the content, but I wasn't super familiar with it. It wasn't my slides. 10 minutes in, slides go down. There were also certain visual things where we needed the dynamic slides to really show what we were doing. So I couldn't easily continue without having the AV back up. Now, I could have just panicked right there. I could have said, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. But instead, I turned it into a teaching moment for the kids. And I said, look right now, what are you thinking of me? Are you looking at me and saying, that Mark, he's horrible. I can't believe it. I'm so embarrassed for him. Or thinking, boy, yeah, that's unfortunate. Boy, that must be tough for him. But I'm not judging him perfectly. And that was a chance to show them that one day you will be here and people will not be thinking you're horrible. They'll be thinking we want to support you. So as you get to be a big speaker, hopefully you can use those teaching moments when something goes wrong in your presentation.
I always think those times become our best stories as well.
They do.
It might be a while before we're comfortable talking about them, but we get comfortable talking about them and we have fun with them. 10 years from now, you don't want to say, let me tell you about that time it went perfectly well.
Exactly. It's much more interesting when it fails.
Yeah. Whether it's a learning opportunity or just having fun with some friends saying, this is what happened. This was the result. I died 1,000 deaths. Now it's funny.
And if others can learn from it, all the better. It feels like all that pain at the moment, that was worth it.
That was worth it. That's right. Mark, when I was doing the research for this interview, I saw that you also did a little bit of stand-up comedy. Can you tell us how you got into that and how it helped you?
To be fair, I do it in a very specific environment. I go to a conference every year called Renaissance Weekend. Different than Renaissance fairs, this is more akin to a TED Talk. And when I started going to the New Year's ones, I saw there were people doing stand-up. Some of them are professional comedians, writers for hit TV shows, late night TV, things you would know. And I remember looking at that and thinking, I think I'm pretty funny. I think I can do this. I know I can stand up there. And I think I have funny things to say. So I just invited myself the next year. I showed up to their room where they initiated the planning for this. I said, I want to do this. I showed up with a couple jokes. And boy, my jokes were not good. They weren't horrible, but I learned something very important over the years. Humor in writing is different than humor in stand-up comedy. Because I can write things that were witty, but as the MC taught me, he said, when you're doing stand-up comedy, you're not going for the smiles, you're going for the belly laughs. And you need to have a certain amount of belly laughs per minute to be able to maintain the momentum. Now, thankfully, this was a forgiving crowd. No one was going to boo you. Everyone's going to be very supportive. And working with all these other professional comedians and writers, they taught me how to refine my jokes, how to refine my comedy. It's been a wonderful lesson for me. And what I've learned when we do our public speaking, what do we know? Don't memorize your speech. Don't know it word for word. You got to be in the moment. You got to feel it. When you do comedy, it's the opposite. You do need to know it word for word. And you need to know exactly where the pause goes and which syllable to enunciate. And in fact, changing a 2-syllable word to a 3-syllable word can make or break the joke. So little subtle things are really critically important. And that's been a great lesson, and it's helped supplement my public speaking because I can now more easily adapt comedy to it. I'll do some spontaneous comedy. I can still do a little of that, but I'll also have for where jokes go in, I know how to refine the joke and make the joke work.
You talked about little tweak here, a little tweak there. Do you spend a lot of time doing those tweaks to get it just how you want it?
For the comedy, absolutely. In fact, we will spend, there's a couple of us, we do routines around 3 to 5 minutes each because there's a number of people. So 1 hour of comedy, we'll spend about 5 hours taking the routines we wrote ahead of time and going through it and revising it and giving each other feedback and doing those little tweaks. So it's about 5 hours of prep for 1 hour of comedy across this group.
Wow. A lot of work, a lot of refinement.
It is.
Well worth it, I'm sure.
And we pull off a great show every year.
Good. I know you're working on an app called Brain Bump. Can you tell us about that and how it could help us as speakers?
As many speakers are, I'm also an author. And one thing I realized is that so often people will read our books. They say, okay, this is great, so much useful information. And then they forget it all 2 weeks after they finish the book. Well, that's not helpful to me. And that's not helpful to them. They want to retain the content. I want them to retain the content. And I also would like them to remember me and my brand. Now, I have nothing else to upsell. I'm not a consultant for what I wrote the book on, but many are. And so they need the audience to remember the brand so they come back and buy more services or products. I realize the same issue happens with podcasts, with blogs, with our talks. We want people to retain the content and they want to retain it. I was shocked this did not exist, the app that I'm about to describe. So I filed a patent on it and built the app Brain Bump. The way the app works, it takes highlights from your content, from your book, from your talk, your blog, your podcast, the key tips, something that's typically about 1 to 3 sentences in length. The content creator uploads those to the server. The user of the app goes and says, okay, I want the tips for Mark's book or her blog or his talk. I want to get those, and just downloads those on the app. And it can be useful in one of 2 ways, either just in-time content. So for example, in my book, there are tips on networking, whole chapter on networking. You read it, you say, yeah, that's useful. But you'd love to get that 5 minutes before you walk into an event. What were those tips from Mark? Okay, I'm going to open the app, pull up the networking tips and flip through them. Got it. Walk into the room. Then there's content which isn't specific to a time, but that we want to develop. If, for example, you are a first-time manager, there's all these things you want to remember. You read the book, but it will fade. So what if you could be reminded each day, like a daily affirmation at a time you set to get the content? So 9 a.m. each day, for example, you might get that little push notification saying, here's a tip. All right, okay, that's good to remember. Swipe it away, done. And so it helps keep the content top of mind. When I do this in my talks, at the end of my talk on the final slide, I put up the QR code for my content. Each piece of content on the app has a unique QR code and unique link. And so if you want to talk to me, here's my email, here's my contact info. By the way, would you like to get all the key points from this talk? Here's the QR code. They snap it once, just take out their phone, snap the QR code. It takes them to a page that says, you don't have the app, click here to download the app, completely free from Android and iPhone stores. Once they have the app installed, they snap that same QR code. It instantly adds my content, and now they have in the app. And then what happens is 2 weeks later, I get a note from the person who brought me in, and she says, it's amazing. It's been 2 weeks and everyone is still talking about the things you covered in your talk.
Brilliant.
Yeah, because I've been reminding them every day. Don't point that out to her. And so it helps them retain it, and it makes me look great.
That's awesome. I can't wait to download it. And you're right about not only giving them the backup to remind them and all. I listen to audiobooks and podcasts religiously. If I'm in the car, I'm listening to one or the other. And you say, oh, I have to remember that. Oh, I have to remember that. And you get to the store or wherever you're going, and I get out of the car and I go to record it or send it to myself, text it to myself and go, I have no idea what it was that I wanted to remember, because you heard 9 things since then.
Exactly.
I love this idea where you can do that. And you're right also that when I speak, and I use a QR code at the end as well, but it's to get people to go to my site, whether they want to learn about my book or my coaching, whatever it might be. But as far as the content goes, they get reminded of that once. When they go there, they can also download it once. But that's just once. And the way you have it again and again and again, not only do they learn it more effectively, they're talking about it. They're remembering it. They're telling the event producer, and they're remembering you.
Exactly. If you think about what we do, often we're using social media to put out some content. You might tweet something at 3:00 this afternoon, and you think, well, this is useful advice, and you put it out, and maybe it's useful to someone. But for most people, that advice isn't relevant or timely for them. And then it goes away because no one's looking at your tweet from 6 months ago, your email from 6 months ago. This is a pull model, not a push model. Social media and email are push. You, the content creator, push it out when you think it makes sense. But instead, someone says, right now, I need the networking tips. Or right now, when I walk into the office, I want the leadership advice or the management advice. It is a pull model. And while we'll reach a smaller number of people, it reaches them exactly when and where they want to get that information. So it really resonates and has a lot more value. And of course, it always comes with the name of your book or blog or talk, which is hyperlinked back. So they remember your brand and they can go further. So unlike social media that wants to keep you on their app, the key to our app is they're going to use it for 3 seconds a day, get the content, and then either close it or click through to get more information. They heard this tip from the podcast. I want to hear the rest of the podcast. I want to read the rest of that article.
How long has this been available?
A couple weeks. So we are recording this in July. I've been working on this. We had a prototype last year in 2021. I've been working on this version since the beginning of 2022. It just came out in the App Store a few weeks ago. It's still in beta. We're still doing some refinement. There's still a few bugs we're working out, but we are adding content. And so content creators are joining the app. By the way, we are just business only right now. Eventually, we can support relationships and spirituality and health and wellness. But for now, it's business content. entrepreneurship, marketing, leadership, careers. So all the content and all the users align well to each other. And we're going to do a big push to add more users in the fall once we do a couple more tweaks to the UI.
This episode will be out probably mid-August. So you'll have a little more time under your belt at that point. Still not where you want to get to, but further along. I can't wait to download it.
Most of the UI should be in place. We might have a few tweaks remaining, and we'll be adding a bunch of content. So my push this summer has been to get more content on it. And so you'll see more content then and even more in the fall, because like Netflix, we're just always adding new content. We don't take things away.
Well, they do occasionally.
Netflix does with licensing deals. We, however, are always doing things with the permission of the content creator. So when you look, for example, at the book summary apps, I know a lot of content creators hate it because they summarize their book. They might get it wrong. They might not convey it in the right light. It doesn't necessarily help their sales. For us, you, the content creator, choose what goes on there. We will never take your content without your permission. You choose what goes there. You choose how to convey it, obviously within our guidelines. And then you can use it to promote yourself how you wish.
Mark, this has been very enjoyable having you on the show. Where can our listeners learn more about you, and how can they get in touch with you?
There are two places you can go. My first website is thecareertoolkitbook.com, and that's where you can learn more about my book. There's a contact page, bunch of stuff there. And that's the book that has networking, leadership, negotiations, and all the other career skills. But then for Brain Bump, that's done under Cognosco Media, COGNOSCO media.com. And at Cognosco Media, you can learn more about Brain Bump. You can also get in touch with me there. If you're interested in getting your content on there, you can fill out the form at the bottom of the page and get in touch with me and say, I think my content would work for this. You can also download it for free from Android and iPhone stores. It's Brain Bump with a space on Android. It should be the same way on Apple. There's a bug right now. I think for Apple, you do it without a space until they get that fixed. So do Brain Bump with and without a space, and you will find it.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Just a reminder, be sure to grab my new book, The Captivating Public Speaker. Engage, impact, and inspire your audience every time. It's available at Amazon.
That's a wrap of another episode of Public Speaking with Peter George. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Tune in Monday when you'll hear another episode of Public Speaking with Peter George, and again Thursday for your next episode of Quick Bites. Public speaking tips and techniques you can digest in 5 minutes or less. Until next time, remember, when it comes to speaking in public, you've got this.